pleasure to have you on. I watched your fabulous documentary. I read your book. Actually listened to audiobook. I'm really glad that you do the audio on that. And after it's getting all the information in, I'd say I'm convinced there was some chicanery to say the least, at the very, very least. And unfortunately, you provide so much, like compelling data. I found it hard to convince anybody because I don't know where to start. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to, help our audience learn about this today. Um, but let's start with this. You are a filmmaker, investigative journalist, and a truth seeker. How would you describe what you do?
What do I do? I try to pay the bills and die in a state of being right with God. That's my full-time job. Most of my life I've been a filmmaker, but before that I was an actor, and I've been on stage at least 500 times. And after doing that several hundred times, I thought, well, who are these playwrights whose words I'm treating like scripture? I could write a play. So I started writing plays, and they were pretty successful. And then I thought, these would make good little short films. So I scrambled together some camera equipment, produced some short films, and then a few years later showed those to someone who needed a TV commercial produced, and then started a video production company. As far as the moon landings or truth seeker, people have said that truth is unfolding, like an onion or a rose petal. We have to be willing to change our mind. The Bible says that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. So, what is pride? Pride is the unwillingness to be wrong. And humility is the willingness to be wrong. I talked to a college professor teaching aerospace in one of the major universities in America, and he said that if he saw Neil Armstrong on national TV confessing that the moon missions were fake, he'd still think he walked on the moon anyway, because he has made a god out of this and refuses to accept the truth. Now, I do believe in God, and it just kind of makes sense. There's a judgment for how we live life on Earth, and if you look around and have eyes that see, there is good versus evil. I mean, obviously, rape, murder, molestation is wrong. Stealing and lying is wrong. And so the people who do those things try to cover it up, try to turn the tables, try to make their accusers the guilty ones. And often the opposite of what they say is actually the truth. If you look at Sibrel.com, that's my website, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. On the homepage is that film that you spoke of called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. This cost about $1 million. It was financed by a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA, who knows that the moon missions were falsified. And when you see the beginning of the film, it starts with the Tower of Babel, which until a couple of hundred years ago, which means for thousands of years, the greatest technological achievement that man could do was build the tallest building. And there was a literal competition, as it still is to this day. Dubai or Tokyo or New York will keep building, one building 1 story taller than someone else will do it. Well, the Tower of Babel was never finished, and it says that the reason they built it was to show off, to make a name for themselves. And the Messiah said that to start a tower and to not finish it is proclaiming to the world that you're a fool. You bit off more than you could chew. And then thousands of years go by, and mankind in the 20th century that saw, the radio and television and all this technology, they built this huge machine called the Titanic. And they were so proud of it, they put in print that it was the ship that God Himself could not sink. I think that might have woken up God from a nap there. It didn't finish a voyage. See, the Tower of Babel never finished, the Titanic never made one voyage. And then Richard Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, but were actually in Clovis, New Mexico, a year earlier on videotape, said putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. So, my first truth-seeking objective is to be right with God. I mean, who's right? Is it the Mormons or the Catholics or the Adventists or the Muslims or the Jews? So I, read the scriptures from cover to cover, read the Quran, read other books, and tried to figure out as best as I can how to win the gift, as it were, of eternal life. Because I don't know if you know the TV show, what was it, Futurama, made by the guy who made The Simpsons. There's
Right.
a character in there, a robot, who always boasts that he lives forever. They just pop out his memory cartridge, pop it in a new robot if he's destroyed. And then his inventor says, I'm sorry, you're one of the first models with no removable memory cartridge. When you go, that's it. And then he says, well, how long have I got? He says, you might only last a couple of thousand more years. That's it? And then what? And then he says something very profound. Anything less than immortality is a complete waste of time. And that is utterly true. What good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? And oddly enough, you see, if you believe the Bible, I went to a church once on a Wednesday night, Michael, and they said, who's Lord of the earth? And everyone's like, Jesus. And he said, wrong. Read your Bible, Luke chapter 4. It says Lucifer is in charge of the world, and he can give the kingdoms to anyone he wants to. That's why our world leaders are liars and murderers, you see. So, how ironic in a fallen world that the most powerful nation on earth falsifies the greatest accomplishment of mankind, the modern day Tower of Babel. A writer by the name of Ellen White, and speaking of the Tower of Babel, said, the monument of their pride became a memorial to their folly. Imagine if the truth comes out, and of course, we'll go into the details about why, indeed, sadly, they really did fake the moon landing. It's just tragic when you realize that's the way it went down. What if the truth about the moon landing fraud comes out and disgraces America? You see, then the monument of their pride will become a memorial of their folly. You see? And so we have to be willing to be wrong. I was a fanboy, worshiping virtually a shrine in my house to Apollo 11 that I moved everywhere that I moved in the military and thought it was the greatest thing. And then an open mind guy who worked at NASA said it didn't happen. And you realize, well, here we are 55 years later. 55 years later, 5.5 decades better computers and rockets, and the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So, back before cell phones, before microwave ovens, when all of NASA's computers combined had 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts ahead of schedule on the first attempt 1,000 times farther than they can go today with 5 decades better technology. Do you realize, Michael, we just proved with logic that the moon landings are fake because it's impossible to have technology greater in the past and in the future. The problem is pride. It says in Obadiah, it blinds you from seeing the truth. You see that? Whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead. It's a tragedy. Whoever did 9/11, it's a tragedy. This is different. This is a positive lie. You see, this is giving people the candy they wanted and trying to take it away and give them manure. They don't want it. At my book at Sibrel.com, which you mentioned is audio, it's also Kindle and print, it's interactive. There are 17 video links. I write a chapter, say, look, I'm about to talk about the subject. Watch this video first. And you'll see all this proof that they didn't go to the moon. And if a person who can go from being the biggest fan reluctantly admits, when I found classified footage of them faking part of the mission right in front of your eyes, I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. What does this mean? It means these people are at large, because I had a millionaire backing me and I was asked not to put certain information in my movie that is in the book, including the testimony of relatives of Apollo astronauts who say their husband and father, who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, was murdered by the CIA because he was a whistleblower of the Apollo program. So not only is our government faking moon landings, do you realize we pay for our own deception? A third of
Right.
our income is given to the government to deceive us about the moon landing and to pay the salaries of the CIA agents who kill our friends and neighbors and family members for exposing the criminals' crimes in the federal government. We're paying for that. The moon landing being faked matters because they're murdering our own citizens to cover it up. They're embezzling money from our hard labor to do it. And so that's my opening rant there, Michael. I wish the moon landings were real. The world would be such a better place. But
Well,
when
Bart,
you realize that's the way it went down, mm, it's tragic.
Well, Bart, that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. I feel like this topic right now, especially with what's going on in the world, we've got our election coming up. You know, we want people to know what their government is actually capable of. And in doing that, maybe if you get a little insight into, what went on with this moon landing hoax, as you call it, maybe they can get a little bit of a more of a inquisitive mind of what else has the government done. Think about if this was what they did all those years ago. What else are they capable of? That's why I feel like this is a consequential topic, and the government is capable of grand deception. So, can you tell me, like, why do you think it is so important that people understand, in your words, why should they really care if the government did this back then, if they faked the moon
Yeah,
landing?
that's a great question, Michael. If they faked it and killed nobody, maybe the devious part of me has a little respect for the cleverness. The guys who tunnel from the dry cleaner into the bank get the gold. Hey, good for them. But not if they slit the throats of three guards who are newly married with children. You see? And that's what they did. The widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon told me. He came home from work one day, said, Han, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment. The next day, he's dead from faulty equipment because he had complained to his senator and congressman that they were a decade or more away from going to the moon, not 2 years. They couldn't even get a wired intercom to work between two buildings that had a short in it. So, how could they possibly do something with 6 feet technology that they can't even do today? There are bases at the South Pole. It's 100 degrees below zero, 100-mile-per-hour winds, but I guess it can be done because they're there. If they could go to the moon, there would be bases there. Just like when they blew up the atomic bomb just 10 years later. Atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if
Right.
we could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. The problem, and the answer to your question, Michael, is if we live in a neighborhood where one child just disappears every week for 50 years, we go, oh, well, it's just one of those things. No, we need to do something about it, you see. Robert McNamara was defense secretary during the Vietnam War, and the public didn't want to get involved. Just like on December 6, 1941, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II. 90%. When have 90% of Americans agreed on anything except on GMO labeling, which was vetoed? I thought we had a democracy and 90% can't get their way. I guess we don't have a democracy, do we, right? So, what Robert McNamara and the CIA did, this is his confession on his deathbed. They created a fake attack by the North Vietnamese on an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin to get people angry because the day after Pearl Harbor, 90% wanted to get even and enter World War II. How about that? 90% against the war, 90% for the war in one day because of Pearl Harbor. They said we need a Pearl Harbor incident. So they created this fake attack in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress passed a law called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution to send our soldiers off. You see that?
Right.
58,220 Americans were killed based on a CIA fabrication. Now, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone, he says with 100% certainty his uncle was killed by the CIA because he was going to shut them down. Okay, so the federal government is willing to kill their own president. They're willing to kill 58,220 of their own people for no reason. I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image of the moon. You see, the problem is it's a positive lie. The issue is these people are at large. Now, and you can insert it or they can go to Sibrel.com and watch it. I found footage of them faking being halfway to the moon. Okay. And there's a third track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay from Earth orbit to pretend like they're halfway to the moon. The lights come up and it's a 1-foot model of the Earth instead of the Earth floating in space like they claimed. And it's dated 2 days into the flight, and there's Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on camera. They're faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit, which means they couldn't leave Earth orbit, just like they can't 55 years later. And when you see this, it's like they really did fake the moon landing. So I worked for NBC as a reporter, and I took it to the news director. I said, look at this. He practically fainted. He said, oh my gosh, they really faked the moon landing. I said, I know. What do we do? He thought about it and thought about it and says, I'm not going to broadcast it. It will cause a civil war. I thought he was overreacting. I thought, well, there'll be congressional hearings and all that. And technically it wouldn't be a civil war. It's not us against each other. It's us against the federal government, you see. Then 10 years later, there's a new news director. He goes through the files. So what can we do? Some, news story about, finds the footage, says, calls me up, says, we're going to broadcast this nationwide and break the story that the moon missions are fake. They fly me to New York, put me up in the Waldorf Astoria, and they pay me thousands of dollars for the exclusive license of a film you can see at Sibrel.com for free on the homepage. And a few days before it's to broadcast, they get a phone call from the federal government threatening them, pulled the plug on NBC or something, and they back down. So it's interesting, allegedly, 200 people were killed to cover up the Kennedy assassination, approximately. And then, of course, there's all those soldiers' death from the fake Vietnam War beginning. The moon landing fraud, as best as I can tell, they may have killed approximately 15 people or so to keep it a secret. Even though it's killed fewer people, it's the one thing that would make the public angry more than anything else to demand change. Now, some podcasters are afraid to touch the hot potato of the moon landing fraud, and yet they claim they're anti-corruption and they're not using the very best tool to end the corruption. Imagine whoever becomes president, Trump or Kamala, and they say, look, this is wrong. They expose it. They force one of the astronauts to confess or they're going to be thrown in jail for treason. They
Buzz
confess, they expose
shook his
it.
hand yesterday.
Yeah, they expose it, it comes out, you could hear a pin drop. They actually did fake the moon landing. What would happen? There'd be incredible reform in the federal government. Do you understand? If it even was allowed to exist anymore. I mean, what would happen if they unplugged the federal government? The states would take over. The state government would take over. Probably be a lot better off, and we certainly have a lot more money, and they wouldn't be killing our own people and deceiving us with us paying their expenses to do so. You see, that's why it matters. This is so dangerous. You can't have a child perpetrator, murderer, rapist running around the neighborhood for 50 years and go, oh, well, one of those things. How can it be that William Benny, who worked for the NSA for 30 years, goes on national TV? He says, oh, by the way, we listen to the private phone conversations of Supreme Court justices in order to get dirt on them so that we can blackmail them to vote the way we tell them to. There's not a single congressional investigation when it's announced on national TV that the NSA is blackmailing Supreme Court justices. Not, it's like it, so what? It's like a pack of gum was stolen from the 7-Eleven. I'm like, do people understand what's going on? The one thing that will change the world and this country is the truth about the moon landing fraud coming out. You know, there's a saying, I'm sure you've heard about it. It's on my website. It says, the truth shall set you free or make you free. And I thought about this just this morning, Michael. If the truth will make you free, then lies will make you a slave. They can tell the truth about JFK. They can tell the truth about 9/11. But if they don't tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, then we're still slaves.
You
And
know what?
nothing has.
I think that's very profound that you say that, because the amount of people that I've brought this conversation up to, even just last night, I was just sitting next to somebody at a bar and I made sure I was like, hey, what do you think about the moon landing? They look at you like you're crazy. And even people that were, I mean, the people in their 30s and people in their 40s, but you weren't alive anytime this moon landing, they just cannot conceptualize that this could be faked. Even when, you start to present them with evidence, it's almost like they're kind of shattering their world. So when you speak about the things that they did back then, the cast of characters that were involved, I mean, it does seem like, it's so plausible. Everybody at that time was flawed. We know that the issues with, Tricky Dicky. Do you see now the same game plan, the same playbook being used in other incidents throughout history? You mentioned 9/11. Do you see something
Well,
like that? Is a similar game
yeah,
plan
well,
was used
you
in
know, it's
incident
like if
to,
a gangster robs a bank and gets $1 million and they get away with it, and the next time they get $2 million, and the next time they get $10 million, it's going to keep on doing it. This is why the truth about the moon landing fraud has to come out. And it was easier to fake than people realize. There's only three eyewitnesses and no independent press coverage, a TV picture controlled by the government. And this argument that because, there are hundreds of thousands of people involved, how could you keep a secret from that many people? Well, they're not going to tell them. That's like saying what a bank teller at Wells Fargo and the CEO know about corruption in the bank are identical. It's completely different. 129,500 people were involved in making the atomic bomb, and only 8 knew what they were making. You see? And so Eugene Krantz, who I talked to, said someone in the command center can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation flight and a real flight. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. If they can't tell in the command center as a NASA employee in the heart of the headquarters, how can we years later or as a child watching it on television? And so the problem is, if you ask Clinton, who, by the way, said on page 156 of his book that he thought the moon landings were fake, by the way, a president said that. When he was asked why did he have the affair that he denied about 20 times, didn't do it, didn't do it, didn't do it, didn't do it, didn't do it. Okay, I did it. That I wonder, right? And then they asked him a great question, right? Why did you do it? And he said, because I could. Because I could get away with it. That's why this is a problem, Michael. Do you see that?
yeah.
Why are they doing all of this stuff? Why is it important that we expose this? Because they'll just keep doing more. And why are they doing it? Because they could. They're so arrogant. Our government leaders are so arrogant, it boggles the mind how arrogant they are. And they're a bunch of gangsters, is what they are. The president becomes corrupt, and they appoint corrupt leaders over every department. At the end of my book, Moon Man at Sibrel.com, is a chapter called What to Do About This Mess. And I propose that the department heads of Justice, FBI, EPA, FDA, they are elected from within. They need to be elected from within those organizations, and the leader cannot be appointed by the President of the United States. What about Congress and the Senate? At least 85% of them are corrupt because they didn't investigate that the Supreme Court justice is being blackmailed, so maybe they're being blackmailed. In fact, they said they're listening to their phone conversations too. So back in the day when the first democracy was invented, about 2,000 years ago, it lasted 500 years, and I doubt if we're going to last much longer in the United States. They chose their Congress by lottery. Now, if a jury chosen by lottery can decide whether someone is executed or not, I think that would be an okay system to decide whether or not to put on a bottle of ketchup contains GMOs, right? So why not have the Congress and the Senate all chosen by lottery, only one term of 5 years, and you'd get filmmakers and podcasters and janitors and doctors and lawyers and teachers and mechanics. We'd have true representatives that have no influence, they have no payback, no reelection. And among those 435 people, let them nominate 5 candidates among those chosen at random for President of the United States. You see, then we have a shot at having true representation. Let those people debate and then narrow it down to 3 with popular vote, narrow it down to 2, narrow it down to 1. Maybe we should do it that way. You see, we need to reset, and we need to reset to 1776. There are so many rules. I was just looking through my emails, and Luke Radowski found out the New York state government is kicking down a guy's door because he has a squirrel as a pet. And according to the rules of the Big Brother, you can't have a squirrel. You can have a dog, you can have a cat, you can have a bird, you can have a snake, but you can't have a squirrel. And they take a squirrel and they execute it. It's like, what is going on here? Okay, so the first document of our country is the Declaration of Independence, which says when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. We have the right to get rid of the federal government. It's on our first document, the Declaration of Independence. Well, according to Betty Grissom, who I interviewed for 4 hours, her husband, Virgil Grissom, was murdered by the CIA because he was a whistleblower at NASA during the Apollo program. So the first one is life. The federal government is taking away life. They're killing their own people. That's all the reason we need to get rid of the corrupt federal government. Second one, liberty. Okay, so back during this little thing we went through for 3 years, they said you can have 4 people at your son's birthday party in your house, but not 5. If you have 5, we're going to turn off your electricity and we're going to drag you off to jail. Okay, so if it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and if all the people are equal, how can one person tell another person what they can do inside of their house? That's not freedom, that's slavery. How can one
Right.
person tell another person you can't open your business until we tell you so? I don't care if 9 out of 10 people are dropping dead. You still have 10% of the population who needs tuna fish and toilet paper, and you still have 10% of the business owners ready to sell it to them. You can advise us to be careful and to do whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't, how can you possibly tell us what we can and cannot do on our own property? Now, if I may rant a little bit further,
Yeah.
Reagan was known for doing trickle down economics. And I used to make a joke when I did stand up. Okay, what that means is you give tax breaks to the millionaires so they can hire more butlers, right? Now, the point is, if electricity can go left to right down a copper wire, it can go right to left. So, this top down government has been around for the entire history of the world, and it's only led to tyranny. Why not move the electricity the other direction? During this banking fiasco, whenever that was in the recent past, instead of giving the banks trillions of dollars, I did a rough estimate that they could have given every American citizen over the age of 18 $20,000. And what would they do? They would go out and buy cars and washers and dryers, and that money would trickle up to the rich people who own those factories and corporations. Why not do it that way? How is it that the president who lives in the District of Columbia, which isn't even a state, can tell the governor of California what they can and can't do? Why is it that the governor in Sacramento can tell the mayor of LA what they can and cannot do? And why is it that the mayor who lives in a subdivision can tell the subdivision what they can and cannot do? He doesn't live there or she doesn't live there. And why is it that the resident association can tell you on your own property that you can't plant a garden in your front yard because it's not aesthetically pleasing? Put it in the back. It's not their property. Let's flip it backwards. Let's have the resident association not be able to tell the property owner what they can and cannot do. Let's say the resident association wants to have a gun-free zone or Everybody has open carry, whatever they choose. The mayor can't tell them they can and can't do that. And then the governor in Sacramento cannot tell the mayor what they can and cannot do. And the president, if we need one, can't tell the governor in a state what they can. Why not just go the other way? Hey, that leads to freedom. So they are absolutely destructive of life, absolutely destructive of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Do you realize it's in the Constitution? The federal government will not establish or prohibit a religion. It says so, word for word. And yet they told people during this thing, you can't go to church. And then they allowed them to go to church like slaves, but you can't sing. First, they said you can't have a wedding. One person told another person that they can't have a wedding reception. That's slavery, master
Yeah,
and slave. And then they said, you can have a wedding reception, but you can't dance. You can have church, but you can't sing. What is going on with this
more
country? I say
control.
reset to 1776. That's my third rant. Back to you, Michael.
Well, Bart, you said a lot, and I'm glad that you brought up that last part about control, basically. Why do you think that the government, what is their game plan? Why do they need to? Wouldn't it be happier just to have a happy society? Why all the implementation of control here? Do you think that there's another reason at play?
Well, I mean, they're just doing it because they can, right? You've heard the expression, a kid in a candy store. A kid breaks into the candy store at midnight. They don't open until 8 a.m. What do you think they're going to do between midnight and 8 a.m.? They're going to eat all the candy that they want. And you have the keys given to these tyrants who kill Kennedy, who faked the beginning of the Vietnam War. 3,000 architects and engineers say it's mechanically impossible for a pinhole going into a grid skyscraper to cause its collapse. Just look at the picture of the Oklahoma City bombing. Half the building was blown away. Did it collapse? No. So how can a pinhole go in and out make it collapse? You see,
Yeah,
what is going on here?
we're talking about the
Something
Twin
is
Towers there,
off.
all right?
Well, yeah.
So
And
yeah.
so the thing is about the moon landing, it's the key, it's the linchpin, it's the finger out of the dike. I didn't see this when the NBC news director told me this 20, 30 years ago. I'm like, no, I don't think so. But I think he's right now. He was right. If the public comes out, if the president says from day one, they faked the moon landing, they screwed you over. They took your money and robbed you, deceived you, and murdered the crew of Apollo 11. I'm sorry, Apollo 1. Then I think both Democrats and Republicans would love Kamala or love Trump or whoever becomes president. They would have a historic, unprecedented referendum to clean up the corruption in the federal government. And you could, read my book, the last chapter at Sibrel.com for a few suggestions on how to restructure the monopoly rules of this government.
And Bart, it seems like a lot of the way that they do this is through control of the media. How do you think that their influence over the media has allowed all this to happen between the moon landing, between COVID, between 9/11, all these things that keep on propping up? How should the public feel about the media?
Well, according to Woodward and Bernstein, right? These are the guys who took down Nixon. And there's some story behind there, but in any case, they said at that time, they had a CIA document, I think 1974, that said at that time, back when it was a law that you could only own one radio station and one TV station, that was thrown out by Reagan and Clinton. They deregulated. Now one person can own every media in the whole world if they want, right? He said, right? Woodward and Bernstein said at that time they found a document that said 400 CIA agents were impersonating journalists at every major newspaper, TV station, and they listed them: ABC, CBS, NBC, Time, Newsweek, Life Magazine, Reuters, Reuters, the Associated Press. All of those were infiltrated. Imagine how much more so now that it's been deregulated. The CIA absolutely controls the media. There was some, I forget, South American dictator, allegedly, or democratically elected, depending on how you look at it, Chavez or somebody,
In Venezuela,
and
yeah.
some independent news organization or nonprofit did a study. There were 1,500 newspaper articles, news stories about him and about the CIA director saying we need to assassinate him. 100% of all 1,500 news articles said they should assassinate him. Wow. I say the CIA has 100% control over the news media. One of the clips, one of the interactive clips at Sibrel.com, it is so sad and heartbreaking. It just proves what I'm saying. They didn't show the Zapruder film that showed Kennedy's head going violently backwards, meaning the bullet came from the front, not the back, until like 12 years later on Geraldo. They said, oh, it's too violent to show. Let me describe it for you. And I think what was his name? Walter Cronkite didn't even have the guts to do it. He was lying so blatantly. He had Dan Rather, his underling, do it for him. So one of the clips at Sibrel.com is Dan Rather broadcast, I think, 2 days after the Kennedy assassination, describing for the public the Zapruder film. Well, in this version, we have the Zapruder film synchronized with his description. And he says in the third fatal shot, Kennedy's head goes violently forward when the video shows it going violently backwards. I mean, I think left and right, you can tell the difference, and I think you can tell the difference between forward and backward. He says his head goes violently forward. There's a Zapruder film is synchronized, it goes violently backward. That was 1963 when you can only own one TV station and one radio station. He said the exact opposite of the truth of one of the most important events in history. So you think they're not going to fake the moon landing because it gives the salivating dogs a bone that they want? Because that's how they see us. They do not call us Americans. They do not call us citizens. They call us consumers. Both Democratic and Republican presidents refer to the American people as consumers. That's all they see us as cockroaches. They think they can tell us when we can go to church or not, when we can go shopping or not, when we can open our business or not, when we can sing or not, when we can dance or not. What is going on? Please pray to God. The moon landing fraud comes out. It's the one thing that will bring down the federal government corruptive system because it will enrage the people when they find out they've been deceived and paid for it and they murdered their own friends and family members to cover it up.
It is completely, I mean, mind blowing to think about that all those years ago this was done, and to just amplify that forward to today. You talk about how many CIA agents were working, or the how the media was owned by so few people back then, or there was actually regulations of how many people can own the media then. And today, when we look at things like the Twitter files that showed how many CIA agents were just working on Twitter. Right. So let's extrapolate that towards, the entire media. So when you think about that, and you think about, well, the media is controlled by the CIA. How are you looking at media today? Are you noticing anything going, all right, there's things being implanted here that seems like this is going to be the next step in one of their in one of their ruses. Like when we see all this stuff about UAP stuff coming out. I mean, what does that make you think?
Well, to tell you the truth, the saddest clip or the scariest clip of the 17 clips at Sibrel.com, you can go there now and watch them. The second worst is what I just described as a birder from. The actual worst is just you can't believe it's real, but it's right there in front of your eyes. Back in the day, I dare say I'm a little older than you. There wasn't 24-hour television. At about 1 o'clock, it would go to snow and it would come back on at 5 a.m. when your local, weather report came on. And right before it went off the air, they'd show like clips of the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument and Mount Rushmore over the national anthem. And I have a 16 millimeter print that was transferred. I think it's from like 1968 or something. And you see at the bottom the lyrics going by, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? And when the lyrics change, they kind of have a ripple effect, like a Venetian blind as they transition. Hidden in there, I can't believe it's true, but there it is. I slow it down. It says something like consume, consume, don't rebel, trust government God. There are subliminal messages in there. You got to go to Sibrel.com and see this. It's unbelievable. It's just like that film They Live. It's almost the exact same wording. It's right there. That's the subliminal things they were doing in 1968. What are they doing now? So the last chapter of Moon Man, like I said, it's audio, Kindle, or print at Sibrel.com. And what to do about this mess addresses your question, Michael, about the media. Okay. So the way it's working now, if you have 1,500 news stories that are in 100% agreement, hello, that's Central Information Agency, right?
Right.
Intelligence and information. So that way doesn't work. So whatever we're doing now, we got to completely demolish, not overhaul, not fine tune. Get rid of that one, throw that one in the garbage can. So what do we do next? It used to be on your income tax, which we need to get rid of also, that you would check a box if you wanted $1 of your tax to support people running for president or something like that. So why not have part of our taxes go toward the nonprofit government agency of journalism, of the nonprofit media? You have reporters chosen by lottery who serve 1 year. It used to be when I was a kid, you had to have one public service announcement every 30 minutes or hour, something like that. So you make it a rule that if you own a TV station, radio station, cable, whatever, you have to provide two 1 hour, broadcasts, or maybe just one hour of news that people are chosen by random. They become citizen journalists, and the people who own the TV stations have to provide all the equipment, all the cameras, all the editing, all the trucks, all the travel, and that's paid for by our taxes for the salaries of those people, and the TV stations provide their equipment in order to do that. Then we'll have independent media. You see, there used to be something called the Monroe Doctrine, that
Right.
if somebody said, "Hey, I think the moon landings are real," they had to show the other side. I think they're fake. I've never seen what we have now is not news. They just rant that Trump is great, or they rant that Kamala is great. That's not news. I can't believe they're calling that news. I mean, it's so bizarre that, and then CNN gets caught with a green screen behind them, claiming they're in Iraq when they're in Atlanta, and I'm
Right.
like, shouldn't they be shut down for that? So we have to have a completely new rule set, and that's what my last chapter in my book is about: how to restructure the government in a fair way, how to restructure the media in a fair way.
Do you think because the media is so intertwined with the CIA that they the reason why people aren't awake to a lot of these things because we're having the conversation, the all-time the trust of the government's at an all-time low. Do you think that they're purposely trying to keep us confused, keep us distracted by small things like, what's going on with Diddy or with all these different things going on with Instagram and TikTok. Everyone's staring at their phones. Do you think that this is all part of the mission of the CIA or one of these alphabet agencies?
Oh, absolutely. I think her name was Anna Nicole Smith. She married like a 80 or 90-year-old guy who was a millionaire, billionaire or
Yeah, I
something.
remember
He
back in the
dies.
day.
And there was a fight over his estate, and I think she died allegedly of an overdose or something. I remember at the time wondering why one person dying, God forbid, we're all sinners, former stripper, uh, why it would be the top news story for an entire month. I was like, what is that all about? That doesn't, what, one person dying of a drug overdose is the top news story for an entire month? I mean, what else was going on in the world? I say we have protocol that we do news stories that affect the most amount of people. Start from that. Let's start with war and starvation, right? And people, drinking dirty water in half the world or more. Let's work on the stories that affect the most number of people and work our way down. Yeah, it's a complete scam. What do you think? The moon landing was a scam. It was giving people this distraction, and who knows what they're up to. They are they are what, gangsters running through the candy store of our lives and our minds and our time and our pocketbooks, and we're financing them. Who knows what's really going on? That's why we need a complete reset. to 1776. We need a completely new rules. We need to reaffirm the Constitution that we have all of these rights that are inherent as being alive people on earth, children of God, or whatever you want to call it, that no one can take. Not one person can't tell another person that they can and can't have a squirrel, or they can and can't open their business. I don't know. It's just monstrous to realize this is going on and there's no accountability, because the people who should be giving accountability are the ones running the show. I mean, you have gangsters running around ruling our country, and I guess ruling most of the world. And it just boggles the mind. No one's doing anything about it. That's why the moon landing fraud is so key. It killed the fewest number of people, but it so burned into people's hearts. They defend it. The government wouldn't lie about such an important thing. Well, they told the exact opposite of who shot JFK. They started a war without by deceiving Congress. I mean, do you understand? The CIA tricked Congress into passing a law to start a war. Do you think they asked Congress and the Senate to fake the moon landing? You want to have a vote on that? No, they did it anyway. So we don't have representation. 90% of Americans want a GMO labeling. I mean, that's pretty fair. The most dangerous thing a human being does every day is swallow about a pound and a half of food every day. I think if GMOs are new and maybe you might want to be all natural, organic, whatever, we should have a right to know. 90% of Americans wanted that. President vetoes it. No, not going to do that. Going to do what the corporations are afraid they'll sell less GMO material if we tell them it's in this ketchup and everything. And it's in about 95% of everything in the store, because 95% of everything in the store contains either soy or corn or canola, right?
Right.
And
And it's a
so,
lobbyist.
yeah, and if people are elected by lottery, there are no lobbyists. There's nothing to lobby for. There's no reelection. There's no payback, right? You just
Right.
do what is right.
Right. And it does seem that one of the things that you keep talking about, like the money involved. This all kind of started when the Federal Reserve was created. They're at the end of the day the thing that's funding all of these things, and that's when Andrew Jackson famously said that's why he got rid of the Federal Reserve, and it seems like ever since then, that's what's uh keeping the greed alive. So having that infrastructure there. One
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
things that
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna. I thought of the scripture,
Yeah.
"Money is the root of all evil," and then
Right.
I thought of Scorsese gangster movies when they kill somebody who's been their friend for 20 years. They said, "Sorry, it's only business." Well, what does that mean? It's only business. That means money. Money is king. The first person who told me that the moon landings are fake, he says it's all about the money. So not only do we have the fact that you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future, because today, with 5 decades better rockets and computers, they can only send an astronaut 1,000th the distance to the moon. And one of the clips at Sibrel.com is a space shuttle astronaut saying, right now we can only go into Earth orbit. I'm virtually quoting him word for word. And we hope to go to Mars and the moon eventually, right? So we have that proof. We have the proof I uncovered of them faking being halfway to the moon. We have a proof on the homepage of Sibrel.com of shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart, allegedly on the moon, when sunlight is always parallel. No matter what time of day, it always remains parallel. They're intersecting. Take it from a filmmaker, it's an electrical light, which means they're not on the moon. You can prove the moon is fake with one photograph. It would prove it in a court of law. And then finally, we have an eyewitness who was there when they filmed it. His name was Cyrus Eugene Akers. And go to the homepage of Sibrel.com. You'll hear his son give a testimony about his father's deathbed confession. While this guy is dying, this guy was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. Now, my whistleblower at NASA, who told me it was fake, I remembered him saying it was supervised by the United States Air Force. And every branch of the military has its special ops intelligence division. The Army has it, the Navy has it, and the Air Force has it. And their special ops headquarters is in Clovis, New Mexico at Cannon Air Force Base. Cyrus Eugene Akers was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. As he's dying, Michael, he says, first of all, I killed somebody. He's dying. He's fearing the judgment of God. And as best as we can tell, if you renounce your sin and confess it, you're forgiven, right? King
Who's he
David,
telling this to?
he's telling it to his son.
Okay.
And his son is like, Dad, who did you kill? Who? And the guy's weeping. I'm sorry, I killed this guy. Well, who? A co-worker at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. So the son brings in the military police to give the victim's family closure. You know, did they just dump him in the desert and claim he disappeared? What happened to the guy? He's there. And you see the video on the homepage of Sibrel.com, him giving this testimony. The military police come in and they, ask him who you killed. He gives them the name. And then he says, well, why? Why did you kill him? He said, well, we both eyewitnessed them filming Apollo 11, the moon landing, a year earlier. It was fake. They filmed it June
Wow.
1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968 at Cannon Air Force Base. They spent 2 weeks bringing in pulverized concrete and building a fake lunar set. They had 2 airplane hangars. They took out the wall between the two to make it a big landscape. They painted it flat black. They brought in the lunar module. I was there. President Johnson was there the first day of filming. And I had a coworker, and he thought it was morally wrong. He was going to tell a reporter, so I killed him to keep it a secret. Please forgive me. So
Wow.
not only do we have 4 times the proof. Logically, you cannot have greater technology in the past than in the future, especially 1,000 times greater. 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than today. Impossible.
Makes no sense.
Shadows intersecting at 90 degrees with the claim of sunlight. Impossible. We have that shot of them using a 1 foot model of the Earth. See it at Sabrel.com. Lights come up. They're faking being halfway to the moon. Everyone who sees it just gasps. I gasped. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake it. And then we have an eyewitness, right? And a deathbed confession. In court, a deathbed confession is twice as powerful as someone who's not dying. They have nothing to lose. Why would they make that up? But people don't want to accept the truth. They don't want to, they're defending. I have podcasters who are defending the moon landing while they claim they hate corruption.
Well,
Uh,
it doesn't make sense. And the thing that people will say against your claims is they will say, well, yeah, the videos were fake, but we went. They just couldn't make the videos. They had to make the videos to prove it to the public, but they actually went because if we didn't go, Russia would have outed us. So what do you say to
well,
that
that's
when people say Russia would have outed us? How come they didn't?
Well, the first question was, would they fake it if they really went? There would be no reason, right? We have them faking being halfway to the moon because they can't go halfway. Otherwise, we'd be seeing the real Earth out the window instead of a 1 foot model of it. So back before they went, 10% of the public thought they were going to fake it. So if they really went, the last thing they would do would be to fake any of it because that would only, add fuel to the fire that they didn't go if they really went. During the live transmission, we didn't see if I were in charge and they were really going to the moon, I'd put a camera on the side of that rocket, have it on 24/7, all the way up and all the way down. During the alleged landing, they had an Atari graphic and it said simulation. They didn't have a problem not having footage. This movie just came out and says, okay, we faked some of the footage, but we really went. That's just trying to cover their ass because the problem is the AI, smartest AI in the world, just about 10 months ago, the smartest AI. Okay, they have these conventions, shoe conventions, automobile conventions. They had an AI convention. All these VIPs were there. Google was there. Not available to the public, but you can test drive this, car around the track. You can test the smartest AI in the world, Google's neural network, multiple AIs hooked up together. One had it write a symphony, one had it write a novel, and one took advantage of its deep fake detector program that has never been wrong. It can tell you in 1 second if a video of Biden or Trump is a deep fake or real. So they fed it pictures from unmanned probes, you see, that can survive radiation,
Right.
taken from the surface of the moon from China in 2014. The computer says they're real. Then they fed them pictures from the Apollo program. The computer said every single one of them was fake. shot in a TV studio. Fake background, fake foreground, fake this, fake that. It just came out. The smartest AI in the world says the pictures are fake. So they're scrambling. Okay, we got to come up with some public relations thing. Okay, they faked it, but we really went. No, they didn't go. They can't go today. They didn't go. Get over it, get over it, get over it. Now, we answered the number one question: how can you have hundreds of thousands of people involved? They're not stupid enough to tell the guy making the glove or the door or the boot handle, hey, we really didn't go to the moon. Be sure not to tell anybody.
Right.
The CEO is not going to tell the bank teller what's really going on, are they? And like I said, the guy in the control room, according to the flight director, can't tell the difference between a quote practice flight and a quote real flight, right? So the next issue is, well, what about the Russians? Well, I know someone who personally works in the command center of the Chinese Space Agency. He said everybody there knows that the moon missions are fake and they're blackmailing NASA in order to not blow the whistle. Congress passed a law. They kicked China out of the space station and they said you cannot give any space technology to China. The CIA is doing it anyway. The CIA is breaking their own laws.
Giving it to
And
China.
yeah, they're giving China is, according to my friend who works in the command center at the Chinese Space Agency, says they are blackmailing NASA for space technology that's illegal for them to receive according to US law in exchange for not blowing the whistle. Go to Sibrel.com, scroll down to the bottom. I have a video of Putin there being shown the results of the AI, saying the moon missions are fake. Doesn't look surprised at all. Former KGB director. In fact, he looks scared. Like if the truth comes out, he won't be able to blackmail us anymore. You know, I could have a picture of a world leader with a prostitute, upload it to the internet, and bring down that person. And then the picture's worth nothing, is it?
Right.
Or I could blackmail them year after year after year after year. I'm sure China has pictures of the landing sites and there's nothing there. You see? And so they're blackmailing the United States. Russia is blackmailing the United States. Is that a good position for the United States to be in? No. You
Y-
can get rid of that blackmail by telling the truth. And what harm is there really? Trump or Harris can just blame Nixon. Feel free. He's in the grave. I don't think he's going to complain, right? Blame Nixon and say we're going to start fresh. Heck, they could really try to go to the moon. Although I would recommend making sure everyone on Earth has a concrete floor, indoor plumbing, and clean drinking water. Funny, Bill Gates goes around to Africa, and I'm sure he just loves black people to death. Maybe that's it. And he gives people all this medicine for illnesses they don't have, but he never gives them concrete floors or indoor plumbing or clean drinking water. I wonder why. Well, anyway, another another side story.
Hey, well, you know what? So I'm glad you said something about the Russians. So the other thing is what people will say, to debunk the debunkers is, well, guess what? Yes, the footage was faked, but we've got proof that we went there because the technology that was left behind on the Apollo 11 mission, the reflectors. When we go up there recently with the India mission, the China mission, they verify the data from their reflectors down to like the length of a paper clip, that the data was 100% correct, that we provided from our reflector that was placed there, that we gave that data back in whenever it was done in 1969 or whatever it was. So what is your comeback to that?
Well, actually, you're half wrong on that one. China
Okay.
has never said that the moon missions are fake. Never. Their culture, their honor is that they won't say that it's real, but because of the blackmail, they also won't say that it's fake when they know very well that it was fake. The fact is, you can bounce lasers off the moon without anything there because the moon is highly reflective. According to a Scientific American magazine that we have from the late 50s, they were bouncing lasers off the moon to tell exactly how far it was away from the Earth in the late 1950s. So all that they had to do is choose landing sites that were identical to those reflective areas and claim they put a reflector there. Plus, the Soviets put a reflector on the moon with an unmanned probe. So that can be the case. You know, you can resolve a Google picture right? Down to a license plate that's at 26,000 miles, but they have a lunar orbiter at only about 60 miles, and you only get these faint little shadows that they claim is of the lunar lander. Well, wait a minute. You're telling me NASA is giving us proof that they didn't fake the moon landing, but they're the ones who faked the moon landing. Do you really think a convicted criminal is going to give you evidence that he's guilty? I mean, come on. You're asking the Fox for proof that he didn't steal a hen? Did you forget that they have a full body picture claiming they're on the moon when they're at Cannon Air Force Base? So what is this little scratch here or whatever? And as far as India claiming that they, have a picture of the site, a friend of mine did a blow up of it, and it's only got 3 legs. That they're covering their tracks. They're putting a little lander there years later. I mean, if 26,000 miles can see a license plate from a NASA satellite, why can't 60 miles see the signature on the plaque on the side of the lunar module? You see, we've never seen that for some strange reason. And of course, radio transmissions can be intercepted, right? They could intercept the Indian transmissions, put in a fake one, and make it look like whatever they want it to look like. The fact is, shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart in a picture that they claim is sunlit, which would be parallel. That means they're using electrical light, which means they're on Earth. And that's from the last mission, right? And they can only send astronauts 1,000th as far to the moon now. That means technology was greater in the past, which means that's not possible, which means
And
they faked it. And we have an
and that
eyewitness, and we have video footage that even a critic agrees is them faking being halfway to the moon.
and you
So,
yeah.
unless you've made a god out of the moon landing, which many people have done, you can see the truth if you're really open-minded.
Yeah, yeah, and it is, one of the things I think that you didn't mention in the book, which I kind of figured when I was looking at it, was the latest mission that was sent by the Indians when they sent their unmanned drone there, whatever it's called. It took them, I think, 40 days to send that, but then they are claiming the original Apollo mission took 72 hours, which is, it kind of is crazy to think that, why would it be so much faster? Back sending humans in, for 30 plus years
Well,
ago,
yeah,
whatever
even
they
a
were, 40
better a
plus years
better
ago.
point is
Yeah.
in my follow-up film, and of course in the book, we
Mhm.
find and we publish von Braun's original findings. He says it's impossible to go to the moon in one rocket if you have humans on board, which need all this radiation protection and everything. He said you would need 3 rockets, each weighing 800,000 tons each. The Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons. It's a difference of 30,000%. Elon Musk says in order to go to the moon, you have to make at least 8 fuel trips first, perhaps more, in order to send humans to the moon. But they didn't do that before. So this is why they destroyed all the original hardware, all the original blueprints, all the original electronic schematics, and all the original videotapes, and all the original telemetry data of where the rocket was of the moon mission. Something you would never do if you really went, but it's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. So that's proof of the fraud as well.
Now, what's one more thing that you mentioned in there that I think it's good that people should know about is let's look at some similar technology that they were building at the same time, and it was almost the same engineers too. You mentioned the 747 that was being built around the same time, right?
About 10 years later. Yeah.
Okay,
The
and
747 was built with 1970s technology. And this is after millions of aircraft had been built over the years, and, millions of aircraft had flown over the Atlantic. And even though it has 10 years newer technology than Apollo, it took 168 attempts, I believe, to get off the ground. The engine kept blowing up and failing, not starting 168 times to get that engine to work, to lift that off the ground. There's never been a single time in the history of the world where an aerospace endeavor worked on the first occasion, except the most complicated one of all time. Even the Wright brothers' kite took multiple tries before getting into outer space. I'm sorry, off the ground. And the South Pole here on Earth took 6 attempts. 5 crews died just going through a place on Earth. right? It's the only time an aerospace endeavor worked on the first occasion, and it's the most complicated one of all time. And it's the only time in the history of NASA that they kept a schedule. Do you realize they've postponed returning to the moon in 5 years, 8 times? I think you had Ford said they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. Carter said they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. You had Reagan said they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. You had Bush Sr. say they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. You had Clinton say they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. You had Bush Jr. say twice they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. Obama said they're going to go to the moon in 5 years. Trump said they're going to go to the moon in 5 years, and they've never been able to keep a schedule to go to the moon. In fact, in 2014, they said in 2018, we're going to have people orbiting the moon. They're 3 years behind schedule, and they only have mannequins orbiting the moon. Now, wait a minute. You can play golf and drive cars on the moon with 1960s technology, and with 5 decades better technology, you can only have mannequins orbit the moon. And this is one of the clips at Sibrel.com. We have a NASA engineer saying, most people don't know this, but the Earth is surrounded by this dangerous field of radiation. It doesn't start until 1,000 miles up. It's 30,000 miles thick. Every space mission, space shuttle, Gemini, Mercury was well below that, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through that deadly radiation to go to the moon. And he says the technology to go through it has not been invented yet. So there you are. We have one astronaut, space shuttle astronaut, saying they hope to go to the moon eventually, that right now they can only go into Earth orbit. We have another NASA employee saying they'd have to go through this deadly radiation, and the technology to do so has not been invented yet. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon and not people. Hello? Anybody paying attention?
Well, Bart, let me ask you one more question. So, you explain all this, we can't get to the moon. And so what do you make of this talk of all this Elon Musk saying we're going to go to Mars? Is this just another money grab? This is the next moon hoax because we could definitely can't send, something of it. They could run the whole scam all over again and just say Mars.
I don't believe Musk is a scammer. I think Musk wants to fulfill dreams, and there's nothing wrong with that. If I had his money, I would make feature films all day long, multiple feature films going on at the same time. Lots of ideas. Send me money, Musk, enough to do one film, please. And he needs the government's cooperation to launch anything, above 100 feet probably. And he needs NASA's cooperation. And so I think he's playing ball to fulfill his own goals. I might do the same thing in his position. He said that the Apollo moon landings are a historical anomaly, meaning illogical for 1960s technology. That's what he said. He said he has to make 8 fuel trips first to a space station before he can go to the moon. We have a clip at Sibrel.com of Von Braun saying the biggest rocket can only do Earth orbit. And from there, you need to make multiple fuel trips to a space station, and then from there, go to the moon. The rocket designer said so, and Musk said so. But they didn't do that, did they?
They certainly did not. You know what, Bart? You blew my mind away, as I thought you would. I think that's the best spot to end it. Thank you so much for coming on. I want everyone on to go out there, check out your documentary, go pick up the book, pick up the audiobook. You do such a good job of presenting that audiobook. I really loved it. I actually listened to it 2 times. So, is there anything else you want to direct people to?
Well, I mean, like I said, I wish the moon landings are real. Oh, it would be such a better world. And it's ironic that it's mankind's greatest accomplishment. It's ironic that people who hate lies are defending it because of pride or making a god or idol out of it. And all of this is backed up. You have to be willing to be wrong to learn. I went from the biggest fan to the biggest critic because they did fake the moon landing. I bet my life on it. And so just go to Sibrel.com, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. You can see all these video links to back up everything that I'm saying.
Everyone's got to go there, check that out. Bart, I hope this is not your last documentary. You've got lots of other topics you need to tackle. You can't stop with just the moon landing. There's other stuff you got to get to, but thank you so much for coming on.
Sure, Michael, you take care.